I would like to welcome everyone to the unemployment insurance webinar. My name is Erickson. I am with LaAnn Boger, and we are going to be speaking about unemployment insurance. And I want to say we appreciate everyone attending today and want to provide some good information. Between us both, LA and myself, we have over 50 years of experience in unemployment insurance benefits. I am an unemployment insurance supervisor for the Department of Labor, and LA is an unemployment insurance adjudicator. What we're going to do for the workshop today is to help hopefully understand what unemployment insurance is and how it works, and how through this webinar we can help you understand how to protect your accounts better. We will have a question and answer at the very end of the webinar. The webinar should take about an hour for the presentation, and then we'll have 30 minutes for questions and answers. When you do your questions and answers, please type them in and make them generic so that everybody can have an answer to the question that you have. If you have specific questions about a specific unemployment insurance claim, I will be giving my information at the end of the webinar, and you can contact me directly, and I can direct you where you need to go or answer any specific questions that you might have. Again, the webinar will take about an hour, and then we'll have a question and answer after that. What we will be covering today is an unemployment insurance overview, chargeability and liability for protecting your accounts. What happens when someone is separated from your employment, either they quit or are fired, and how to protect yourself against fraud, and how to help us protect the unemployment insurance fund by reporting fraudulent information that you may come across. I will now turn the time over to LA, and she will start with the unemployment insurance overview.
Thank you, Eric. Good morning, everyone. Establishing unemployment benefits eligibility, there are two parts to this. The claimant files a claim for unemployment insurance, and they have to be both monetarily eligible and personally eligible to collect benefits. If they are missing one of those pieces, they're not eligible to collect unemployment benefits. Monetary eligibility is based on wages that the claimant earned during the base period. The specific quarters we're looking at to determine how much and how long the claimant would be eligible. The base period is the time frame of wages the claimant earned. If a claimant filed their claim today, October 30th, the most recent completed quarter is July through September of 2025. But as of today, it's not yet reportable or required to be reported yet, not until October 31st, by the end of the month following the end of the quarter. So as of today, we may not have the most recent quarter yet, July through September. So we're using the 4 reported quarters prior to that, the second quarter of 2025 back to the third quarter of 24, June 30th of 25 back to July 1st of 24. So looking at this table here, this claimant has worked for ABC Inc., 123 LLC, and Tester Company, 3 different companies during those quarters. They're monetarily eligible for $312 a week for 10 weeks. How that calculation works is we take the highest quarter, and in this case is ABC, or $8,117.36. We divide that number by 26. And we use 26 because it is most common that people get paid every 2 weeks. Not everybody, but most people get paid biweekly, and there are 26 pay periods in a year. Some people are paid monthly, some weekly, some twice a month, but every other week is the standard we use. So 8,117.36 by 26 is 312 rounded down. The number of weeks you're eligible for is between 10 and 21. 10 is the minimum number of weeks you can collect or be eligible for, and 21 is the max. So how do we get the number of weeks? This person is eligible for the minimum. And the reason is, if you look at the consistency of their work history, it's not the best. For example, if someone earned $10,000 every quarter, in each of these quarters, they would be eligible for the maximum number of weeks, 21. Let's look back to the base period table for a sec. For this person, that consistency isn't there. 8,000, 1,500, 500, 3,000. They're kind of up and down. There's a formula calculating the less consistent it is, the less weeks there will be available. And in this case, this person has 10 weeks available. So looking back to the minimum and the maximum amounts, the amount of benefits, the dollar amount, the minimum is 72 and the maximum is 590. If you have 1,872 in one quarter, and that's your max, and that is your maximum quarter, the most quarter, the amount of benefits, the dollar amount, the minimum is 72 and the maximum 590. So 1,872 by 26 is $72, the minimum. The maximum 590 is 15,340 in one quarter. That by 26 is 590. Let's say you had more than that. Let's say you had 20,000 in one quarter. It still maxes out at 590. So again, 10 weeks is minimum to 20 weeks maximum. That 21 can change depending on how high unemployment insurance is the previous quarter when unemployment insurance is high. More weeks can become available. When it's low, there can be less than 21 weeks, which is really low. Currently, unemployment insurance is relatively low. The last unemployment rate I saw was July at 3.7%. So that's the first part of eligibility, monetary eligibility. The claimant also has to be personally eligible. For personal eligibility, there are 4 criteria they have to meet. They must be out of work through no fault of their own. Typically, that would be a layoff or business closure, something like that. We'll talk more about separations later on in the presentation. They have to be fully available for work. A claimant must be in their local labor market area, have childcare arranged, transportation all worked out. Compelling personal circumstances can also be a factor. Some examples of availability issues we address, say if someone was incarcerated for any part of the week, that could deny a claimant benefits. School attendance, if they're going to school, it can affect their ability to seek and accept work. They have to be physically and mentally able to work. At the time the claimant opens up their claim, they must be physically able to work full-time or medically verified evidence the hours they can work. Everybody has to be capable of doing some kind of work, and that kind of work is available in their labor market area for them to be eligible to collect unemployment insurance benefits. Seeking or returning to full-time work. Most people, when they're out of work, they're required to look for jobs and complete 5 work search activities per week, either in person, by phone, online, fax. And they're required to keep good documentation and provide this information each week when they certify for unemployment benefits. We have a program where we spot check, randomly pull work search activities the claimant has reported, and verify the information they provided to make sure that they are actually doing their job search contacts as they're required to. They could be returning to full-time work for an employer. We call these people job attached or employer attached. Must be returning to work within a 16-week period. We look at wages paid to the claimant to support they were full-time prior to becoming unemployed or laid off. The legislature came up with 16 weeks allowed for employer attachment. Many states are much less, but they did this to help employers retain their employees, such as agriculture employers or ski resorts, landscaping companies, to help them retain their workers. Next, we'll review chargeability and liability, and I'll turn it back over to Eric.
Thank you, Ellie. Let's talk about chargeability and reliability. And this probably is one of the most important portions of the webinar that employers will be most interested in because it talks about your taxes and how much you may have to pay or owe in regard to when someone files for unemployment insurance purposes. So let's talk about the two kinds of employers. There's experience rated employer, and also there is a cost reimbursement employer. Basically, a experience rated employer is someone who it pays their taxes on a quarterly basis. They will receive a note from the Department of Labor or tax and will be telling them how much they owe in regard to their unemployment insurance tax. A cost reimbursement employer is an employer who is normally someone or an entity that is a nonprofit or a government entity or a school district. A cost reimbursement employer is one that doesn't necessarily pay unemployment insurance tax on a quarterly basis, but they will pay the portion that they had in if when someone files for unemployment insurance benefits. For an experience rated employer, as we said, you pay quarterly taxes. The tax is based upon an experience ratio. The highest rating for unemployment insurance is 5.4%. If you are a new employer, you have an entry rate of 1%. The absolute lowest rate, if you never have anybody file for unemployment insurance benefits, is 0.281%. And how that is calculated is the tax is based upon the first $55,300 that an employee earns. So that portion is taxed if an employee earns $70,000. The next portion of that, which would be $14,700, is not taxed for unemployment insurance purposes. For a cost reimbursement employer, you're usually, again, a nonprofit organization. You do not pay your quarterly tax. You are always liable. What that means is that when someone files for unemployment insurance benefits, if they receive benefits, regardless of the reason that they separated from your employment, you would be liable for any unemployment insurance or your portion of the unemployment insurance that was received by the claimant. What is chargeability? It refers to whether or not the employer's account will be held chargeable for benefits paid to a claimant. And so let's take a look back at the uh, base period that we had previously. And if you look at the employers, ABC Inc. and 123 LLC, it says that they are regularly taxed rated. What that means is that they are an experience rated employer where they would pay quarterly taxes. Then you will also see Tester Company, which is a quarterly billed. And what that means is that they would be the one who would be a cost reimbursement employer. So what we would see in here is we would need to look at who would be the chargeable employer. And how we figure that is in the current time frame that we are looking at, or the base period. In this case, the current base period is July 1st of 2024 through the end of August 2025. And the employer that this claimant earned the most from was ABC Incorporated. So that employer could be potentially held chargeable for any unemployment insurance benefits. In regard to chargeability, we would look at why the separation occurred, et cetera, and the cause of the separation. The Tester Corporation, which is a quarterly billed or a cost reimbursement employer, would be held chargeable for their portion, which would be about 20 to 25% of any unemployment insurance benefits that the claimant may receive during their time frame that they are filing for unemployment insurance benefits for that claim year. So again, how this is determined, we look at the base period, we see who the major base employer is, which is the employer that the claimant earned the most from, and we look at the final cause of separation from the major base employer or the MBE. And depending upon the reason that the claimant was separated, for example, let's say it was just a seasonal layoff. Winter started and there was no more work if it was a construction company. Then the employer on the base period, ABC Inc., would be held chargeable for their portion of the unemployment insurance benefits, or they would be taxed for the unemployment insurance benefits that the claimant received. And if the claimant was separated due to a discharge/firing or the claimant quit, we would look at the reason of separation and make a determination in regard to the unemployment insurance regarding that employer. If the claimant, for example, was discharged for good cause, they may have had attendance issues and they violated the employer's policy, then there is a possibility that the employer's account would, or ABC Inc. would not be held chargeable. If the claimant quit to go to other work, etc., then more than likely the employer's account would not be held chargeable for the same reason. So again, when an employer is held chargeable is if a claimant is laid off or their hours are reduced through no fault of the claimant's own, or if the employer or the employee was discharged due to misconduct, or the claimant quit with good cause. For example, there's very rare situations, but for example, if a claimant had to quit with when they were being harassed, the employer account might be held chargeable in that regard. When a major base employer is not chargeable is when, again, the claimant was discharged for misconduct, and we will discuss later the information in regard to what we constitute as misconduct, etc. But like the example I gave before, if the employee, let's say they stole from you, that would be more than likely looked at as misconduct, and then there's a possibility your account would not be held chargeable. If the claimant quit without good cause, let's say they had to quit because they broke their leg and could no longer do the work and they had to quit your employment, then your account would not be held chargeable. If the claimant also voluntarily reduces their work hours, maybe they want to take some time to take care of a family situation and they reduce their hours from 20 to 40 hours and they file for unemployment insurance benefits, your account would not be held chargeable at that point either. And also a medical quit, again, if the claimant breaks their leg, could no longer perform employment with you. Let's go over now separation issues, and I'll turn it back to LA.
Thanks, Eric. We're going to review when a person becomes unemployed, what type of separation is involved, and how we address those separations with you for discharges or quits. We're going to have to do some fact finding to determine why this person is unemployed and whether they meet the criteria to be eligible under those situations. I'd like to go into burden of proof on a discharge. If the employer says, as of this day, you're done working here, the employer is the moving party, and that's considered a discharge or fired. If the claimant quits, they say, as of this particular day, I'm done, and they're the moving party. As the moving party in a discharge, you, the employer, bear the burden to establish the reason for the discharge and burden of establishing whether it's due to misconduct or not. And that's why when a person files, and we first send out notice of claim filing to you, sometimes through sides, that a past employee has filed a claim for unemployment benefits, we're also more than likely going to be contacting you to gather details about why you let that person go. You bear the burden to establish the reason for that and if there's misconduct involved. What happened? Why you let that person go on that day? The timeline of the discharge, and we may ask for supporting documentation. Our assumption is you may not know what all is necessary to establish misconduct and what meets the criteria or would disqualify a past employee for benefits. So that's why we're going to ask you a lot of questions, details about why you let this person go, what happened on that last day, the last situation that made you determine to let this person go. And then we're going to ask you about timeline of related situations or things that led up to that. For example, attendance. We're going to ask you, when was the last day they missed work? And when was the last day they did work? Because we're looking for, if the person continued working since that last situation where they missed work, we're going to need to know why if they continue to work. It's a requirement that we ask for this timeline from you because if a person has done something you consider to be a terminable offense, something you're discharging them for, and you continue to allow them to work, it's going to be hard to say misconduct, truly misconduct, if you allowed that person to continue working. So we're going to look at the last day of work, the final incident that made you decide to let that person go, and any relevant information as far as the timeline that led up to that. If a person has a problem with attendance and you let them go the day after that, we have a good timeline as far as the last day of work and the final incident. And then we're going to ask you for all the details of the timeline that led up to that. Has the person had problems with their attendance in the past? We're going to ask you for the dates, ask you why they missed work, and hopefully you'll know because it is critical, and we'll ask if you gave them warnings, verbal or written, and we're going to try to get the whole timeline mapped out to find out what this person did, what you did to try and correct the behavior as far as letting them know it's not acceptable and that it continued, and that's why you let them go. And that's the timeline we're going to be looking for. Once we have that timeline, we're going to ask you for supporting documentation. First, we're going to document verbally what led up to the separation, and then ask for the documentation to support that, such as a copy of your company policy. We don't want the whole policy. We're looking for the section of the policy that the person violated and the consequences for violation, like the part that reviews progressive disciplinary actions, if that's applicable. So if it's attendance, we just want the portion of the policy that addresses attendance. We're going to ask you for the signed acknowledgement the person received your policy, where your employees signed for your for your handbooks and policies, making them aware of the attendance and what you guys expect of them. If you gave them verbal warnings, we're going to ask you who said it, what was said, when was it said, so the person that gave the verbal warning, a firsthand statement from them. Hopefully there was someone witnessing the verbal warning being given. We're going to ask for a firsthand statement from that person too, as far as what they heard and saw, what was communicated to the employee at that time. If it's a written warning, hopefully you had them sign it. That's the best case scenario. We're going to ask for copies of those written warnings. It seems like a lot of information, but this is what's necessary to support your position of why you let that employee go. The reason why we first document all of the information that we verbally receive from you is when we call you up and ask you all these questions and get the details, and then ask for supporting documentation, policy, warnings, witness statements. The reason for that is we have to offer your ex-employee rebuttal opportunities. So we're going to share all of this information, the final incident, the last day worked, any warnings that were given, written or verbal. We're going to ask that ex-employee if they agree with all of this information. If we ask you for details and supporting documentation, but the documentation does not come, we give deadlines and that deadline passes, and we went for a rebuttal from the claimant, and they say, nope, that didn't happen. Whether it did or not, all we're looking at that point is a he said, she said situation. And with that, we'll come to you one more time and say we shared the information with the past employee. They disagree with whatever is there. And we're going to ask you one more time for that information to support your position. It's not whether we believe you or them more. It's a matter of looking at the information that we have as to the reason why this person is no longer employed with you. And if it's a he said, she said, you have borne the burden to establish misconduct at that point in time. And that person, even if they had the problems and all the warnings were given, if they dispute that and you don't provide the supporting documentation, that ex-employee may be allowed benefits. And in that situation, if there are a lot of benefits on that separation, and if you're the major base employer, your account is going to be held chargeable. Trying to help you be aware of what is necessary to support your position, especially if the person was discharged due to misconduct, to support your position and have those benefits denied, because we're here to pay benefits when benefits are due. If the person doesn't meet the criteria and shouldn't be eligible, We want to deny benefits if they're not entitled to them. In a discharge, the burden rests with you as the employer, the moving party, and we're going to call you and ask a lot of questions. In a quit, the claimant has the burden to establish a good cause for quitting. So we're going to start our fact finding when they file their claim with them, and we're going to do the same thing with them. They have to establish that they quit. The reason for quitting has to be connected with the employment, and it has to be for good cause. If they can do that, they can be found eligible for benefits. The questions are going to be similar: the last day they worked, the final incident that made them decide to quit, the timeline. It's similarly the information that we would ask you, but we're going to ask them as they are the moving party, saying, on this day, I'm not coming back. The claimant will be denied benefits if we have the information and supporting documentation to establish the misconduct. We define misconduct as a willful disregard of the employer's interest, a deliberate violation of reasonable rules, or a disregard for standard of behavior the employer has a reasonable right to expect. If it is truly misconduct, if they've done something wrong, we're going to really try and work with you to get that information to support your position. Going back to the timeline, we really want to get all the information up front before we even talk to the claimant. Wait and get all the documentation to support the finding of misconduct before we offer rebuttal. It's going to save time for you, save time for us, and get the decisions out for you and the claimant to determine whether they're eligible, so everybody knows the outcome. If a person is discharged or let go and it's due to no fault of their own, such as the medical situation or during their probationary period, they were trying their best, they just weren't capable of meeting the needs of the position or your expectation of the position, and you let them go. That's not misconduct. And that person should be eligible to the unemployment benefits. What the department needs, we've gone over a lot of this. We're going to ask a lot of questions. The last day of work is critical. Final incident leading to that separation, the timeline, the warnings and policies. We see policies, employer handbooks, as a guide to keep and retain good employees. If they're not doing what you need, policies are there to help them get them on board with your expectations, or to let people go if they're not going to work out. If the warnings are verbal, try and have a witness there. Someone that can say, yes, I saw this person tell that employee, whatever it was, as far as what they were doing wrong and what they needed to do to correct that. The conditions of the job are something we look at if the employer is not doing something right. If the employee is not doing something right. And that's what led to you deciding to let this person go. We're going to want to know, what was the expected behavior of that employee? What did they do to not meet that expected behavior and cause this separation? We're really going to go into the details on that. The claimant is a moving party on a quit separation, and the reason has to be connected with the employment. An example of it not being connected to the job is, for instance, a personal reason, like the claimant quit to move to North Dakota to be closer to their family that also lives there. If it's not tied to the employment in some way, it's not going to be considered good cause, and that person is not going to be eligible for benefits. So we're going to be gathering information on the timeline, last day of work, why the claimant made the decision to quit, the conditions of the job, what were the duties of the job, what did the claimant expect from the employer if something happened. An example of that is if payday was every 2 weeks, every other Friday, and now payday is not being met, it's 2 or 3 days late. That's the expected behavior. Every other Friday is payday. And if that's not being met, that's what happened. That's why the claimant quit, because they were not being paid on time as scheduled. We would still expect the employee to come to you as the employer and make you fully aware of the situation, whatever the situation is, give you the opportunity to address the situation, make it right if it's reasonable. We explore, have they pursued all reasonable alternatives? And what we mean by that is the opportunity for you to address their concerns or the issues before they quit. If they don't do that, more likely than not, if they haven't made you aware of the situation, the problem they're having, if they haven't given you the chance to address it, it's going to be hard for them to establish good cause because they still have to pursue other options available or reasonable alternatives, if, as we call it, before quitting. To recap some of the documentation, we may ask you for copies of relevant policies, if there was a policy violated, and just that part. Sometimes we get the whole 78-page policy, but we're only looking for and needing pages 22 through 24. And we'll take all 78 pages, but we'll more than likely need to reach back out to you to clarify what pages of what was sent is relevant. We're looking for the signed acknowledgement, copies of written warnings. They hold more clout than verbal, and especially if they're signed. Verbal warnings are valuable as well, though, and best if there's a witness statement of the warning to support that did happen. First-person witness statements of the final incident that caused the discharge. For example, if something happened out on the production floor, the employee did something they shouldn't have, we're going to want signed first-hand witness statements of people that saw that, a full description of what they observed, timeline, when, who said what to whom. Some of the things we ask for are time cards and attendance records. We give deadlines to provide, usually 2 business days. If that deadline passes and we didn't receive it, we're bound to make a decision in a timely manner, and we're going to make the decision based on what we have. Once we go through the whole fact-finding process, the decision is made and finalized, and it's mailed out to both you and the claimant. Please read through that when you receive those. And if you disagree with the department's decision, both you and the claimant have protest rights. You have 14 days from the date that decision was mailed to protest it, to appeal that decision. Both parties, you and the claimant, have the right to appeal. Protests have to be in writing, signed by the interested party. You're an interested party. The claimant is also an interested party. This information can be mailed, faxed, emailed. These directions for filing an appeal, they're available on the decision letters you receive and also on our website, labor.idaho.gov. If you file an appeal or the claimant files an appeal, there will be a telephone hearing with a hearing officer. If you have questions about the appeals process, the Appeals Bureau phone number, 208-332-3572. That number is listed on each of the decisions mailed out. And I'll turn it back over to you, Eric, to go over fraud.
Thank you. So there has been some recent legislation that the legislature has passed to help employers with ghosting. We have many times when we speak to employers, the employers will say that when someone applies, but then they never show up to the interview, or the employee is hired, but they never show up to start working. What the legislatures have done is to bring in some legislation to help combat this so that individuals who are on unemployment insurance don't receive unemployment insurance if they don't respond to the request for interview, or the applicant doesn't attend a scheduled interview, or they refuse to show up for work. We have established through the Department of Labor an email to help individuals who don't show up for work. And also we wanted to speak about sides and tell you about both of them so that you can provide us more timely information to be able to report these types of things. One of the things is to report on SIDES, and SIDES is the State Information Data Exchange System. And what that is almost every state in the union has signed up for it. Arkansas and Massachusetts are very close to signing, so it would be only Minnesota that isn't. And basically what SIDES is to help you to send your information in electronically. And there are several benefits to SIDES, and this is how SIDES works. SIDES is a national internet-based system. You receive your information and can respond to UI requests electronically. There's no longer letters. You don't have to wait. We don't have to wait. You don't have to try and fax information in. What happens is when we, as the unemployment insurance benefits, we send our information to a SIDES central broker system who contacts then you as the employer to have you provide information in regard to the separation. One advantage to SIDES is that it can provide you all of the information that you need to be able to provide us all the information that we need. And some of the benefits of SIDES are to save on postage. We know that employers, you have a lot of expenses, and even though postage might not be one of the bigger ones, it still costs a lot of money to send letters back and forth. It is also more timely. It helps when you receive it via your email, you can respond to it right then and be able to gather all the documentation and information that LA spoke about, and then be able to send that back to us in just a few clicks. It makes it a lot easier than having to, if you were trying to send that via fax or via the mail, to gather all the information, making sure it's all there and putting that in the mail or fax and trying to make sure that that comes through. It's also gives you a less chance for follow-up. Like LA was saying, sometimes when we are contacting you when there is a separation, either a quit or a discharge, we sometimes, due to due process, have to follow up with a phone call when we don't have a certain piece of information. Like the example that LA gave, when you send us the full employee handbook, we may not know, and even when we review all of the pages that you send us, we may not know specifically what you may be referencing in regard to a separation. So that's where we sometimes have to call back and say, okay, we have your employee handbook. What specific pages did you want us to specifically review for you? And put that into the record. And when you sign up for SIDES, you can specify and put in electronically what specific pages you wanted to have followed up on and wanted to be part of the record. It also provides less chance of appeal because it gives you an opportunity to uh, answer specific questions that are set up for responding to a discharge or a quit. Sometimes, as an adjudicator, if we call you, we may forget a question, so we have to call back. This it eliminates that because it gives you all the questions in front of you, and then you can go in and you can put in the information that you feel is relevant to the specific separation. And sometimes when you answer the phone and we ask you a question, sometimes you may give information, but then after the conversation is over, you may think, oh my, I should have included this. SIDES will help eliminate that by giving you the questions, and you can answer those questions in regard to what you feel is necessary for the separation. It also conforms with the 7-day response requirements that we need to have you respond by for unemployment insurance purposes. It also helps control your tax rate. Again, using SIDES, you can see who is filed for unemployment insurance benefits. You can also see what determinations have been made on your unemployment insurance accounts. It's free to employers. It doesn't cost you anything. It is very, very easy to sign up for. And also, coming soon, we will be able to now send determinations to you electronically. And the good thing about that is, as LA talked about in regard to appealing, sometimes when we send through the U.S. Postal Service, it might take 2, 3, 4 days for that determination to get to you. And so there goes almost a third of your time if you needed to appeal the decision to appeal that decision. Whereas when the non-monetary determinations start flowing through sides, your determination or the determination that was made on the unemployment insurance claim will be sent to you instantaneously the same day. So it makes it very nice and very easy to check everything. It's a one-stop shop really for employers to check everything that they need to check on any unemployment insurance claims that are being filed and any information that may be necessary. To be able to sign up for the unemployment insurance side system, all you need to do is go to labor.idaho.gov/businesses/sides. And you can sign up for it. It takes just a few minutes for you to sign up. And enrolling in the system allows you to receive and respond to, like we said, unemployment insurance claims online. And it's a free service that's offered to you. I use the example, it's a one-stop shop where you can just click and purchase whatever you need to do, or give us the information of whatever you need, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. If you would like more information about sides, or you want to be contacted by the Department of Labor for a representative who can go through more detailed information in regards to sides, please email us at sides, that's SIDES, at labor.idaho.gov, and we will respond very quickly to you and give you and answer all the questions that you need in regard to the sides system. We also have a report for new hires. This helps us to make sure that people who have been hired for unemployment or for employment aren't still filing for unemployment insurance benefits after they have been hired full time. And this pertains to any new employee who has been hired within 20 days of the start date. So for example, let's say you hire someone on November 1st. We would ask you to report the new hire within 20 days of that date. So by November 20th, for example. Also, we would like you to report any employees rehired who haven't worked for at least 60 days. This could pertain, for example, to employees who may work construction. And a lot of times in the winter period, we know that the employee may be laid off more than 60 days because the weather is not amiable to having the employee come in and do construction work. And again, the reason that we ask you to provide us this information in regard to new hires is so that we can cut down on the chance that any employees who have been hired and who have started work are continuing to file unemployment insurance benefits in an erroneous manner. If you'd like more information, again, you can go to our website at labor.idaho.gov/new hire and get some additional information in regard to the new hire process and also how to report any new hires that you might have. We also have the ability to and ask you to report any fraud that you have. For example, we have many employers who use the email work.refusal@labor.idaho.gov to report any potential applicants who do not show up for interviews, or any potential employees who you may have hired, but who don't show up for their job on their first day. This helps us, and we do review and take very seriously any email we receive in regard to any work refusal or any claimant who does not show up for a job interview. Many times there are claimants who have filed for unemployment insurance benefits who have either refused the work or have not shown up for a job interview that we can track and then look at their unemployment insurance benefits to see if they are eligible and the reason why they may have refused the work or may have refused an interview. So if you do have in your hiring process, any individuals who say they will come and will interview with you or they will start a job they want to start a job with you, but don't show up and ghost you, please use this email it and send us that information, and we review every name that we receive to make sure that anyone who is filing for unemployment insurance benefits who may have refused a job interview or may have refused work is investigated to see if they still should be eligible for unemployment insurance benefits. Additionally, if you would like more information in regard to the reporting potential fraud, you can also go to labor.idaho.gov/businesses/report fraud. And this does not just necessarily go with anyone who may not have shown up for a job interview. If you come across information, for example, of someone who maybe used to work for you but now works for someone else, but is still filing for unemployment insurance benefits, you can provide us that information and we will investigate that information to make sure that payments are being paid to claimants who are eligible for unemployment insurance benefits. You also have contact information. Anytime you want to, if you don't want to use email, you can also fax us. Our fax number is 208-639-3255. We also do have an employer line. If you would like to speak to someone in person, you can call the number 208-947-1055 and speak to someone directly, and they can answer any questions that you might have in regard to what we've talked about in regard to fraud, or also anything that you may have questions about regarding sides or any other information that you might need to have for your unemployment insurance accounts. And or we can also send you to specific departments if you have specific questions on your unemployment insurance tax rate, for example. We can send you to our tax representatives and they can help you with that information. Again, the employer phone number is 208-947-1055. We would also like to go over some suggestions that from our Unemployment Insurance Bureau Chief, Bea Murphy, about how to protect your account. Because we as a department do realize and know how important it is to have your account be protected and how important it is when you're doing business. One of these things is to make sure that you issue a handbook or a policy statement to each employee. And we know that, sometimes it's hard to if you're a small mom and pop shop to have an extensive policy or handbook. A handbook doesn't necessarily have to be pages long. If you're just a small entity, put down what you expect the employee to do. And that could be a one-page document, it could be a 10-page document. It's always good to put that information in writing and have the claimant sign that. So if there ever is a case that the claimant quits or is fired, you have that documentation to show that the claimant was made aware of your expectations as the employer in regard to them being an employee. In my experience, I have had many situations where the employer said, well, I told him this, and this, and the claimant comes back or former employee says, I was never told that, and there's no documentation. It makes it very hard to deny unemployment insurance benefits when there's no documentation regarding that. Also, additionally, in reviewing again written warnings, have that written warning signed by an employee. It could be something as simple as you typing up an email and sending an email confirmation to the employee. That would be considered something that is potentially signed or at least acknowledged that you spoke to the claimant in regard to any scenarios that they may have had to be advised about or warned about. Also, additionally, if you have any witness statements, it's also good to get statements from them. And if you do have witness statements, to make sure that those witness statements are signed by the witness. Because for our purposes, if you send us a witness statement, but it is not signed by the employee who witnessed it, it's just general information. It doesn't have any clout to say that, yes, John Doe signed this witness statement, and therefore it gives it more authority. Also, have consistent methods for conveying changes to policies. Many times, employers, in my experience, again, have uh, changed a policy, but not necessarily conveyed that to the employee that was in question. And you can use, again, email to convey those policy changes, to have that as an acknowledgement of the employee acknowledging that they at least received the email and read it. It is better if you can have that as a signed statement that any policy changes that you had, but if you can't, the email does work also. Also, dealing with problems the same way with all employees. Sometimes if an employee gets into a fight, and let's say they get into a fight with the owner's son, and the employee is fired, but nothing happens to the owner's son. Sometimes we have to look at it and find out the reasons why, to make sure that everything was fair in regard to that final incident. And if it wasn't, sometimes that can lead to a situation where a claimant may be eligible for unemployment insurance benefits. Um, Tell us about the final incident causing the discharge. Here again, LA talked about timelines. And when we talk about timelines, we're talking about the incidents that led up to the separation. What happened on that day? Why did you choose that day to let them go? If it were an incident that happened 3 days later, but you discharged them 3 days later, why did you wait 3 days? Maybe there was a weekend, and that could be just a good reason that you weren't there on the weekend. So you let the incident happened on Friday and you let them go on Monday. That's just fine. But for our purposes, for unemployment insurance, we need to know if there's a gap in time. Also, if the reason that we use that time frame is because sometimes your actions, when you want to be nice as an employer, can be seen as condoning a behavior. If the incident happened a month ago and it's Christmas, and you don't want to discharge the employee during Christmas and you wait till January, then how really serious was that situation? So, when we ask for the final incident, we really do want to kind of narrow it down as to, okay, when did you make that decision to let them go? Also provide firsthand accounts as to what happened. Again, here it reverts back to any witness statements that you might have or anything like that. Always firsthand information works best. If it's third hand, then sometimes the credibility can be called into question, for example. Also, please provide us any and all supporting documentation. If you know that they stole from you and you have a video of that, then provide us that video if at all possible. We do know that sometimes there are situations where you can't provide documentation if it's an ongoing investigation, but if you do have documentation of it, please provide us that documentation, because that's what really helps us to, when we go to the claimant to say the employer's provided this information, how do you respond? And if you have the preponderance of evidence, there's a good possibility that benefits could be disallowed. Respond to requests for information in a timely manner. Um, like with the 7-day response, if you are provided information in regard to a claimant has filed for unemployment insurance benefits, if you're wanting to provide information, please provide that to us in a timely manner. When we are doing an investigation and we have to give an employer or a claimant more time to gather documentation, we give them what is called a 48-hour business time frame to provide that. That's basically 48-hour, 2 business days to respond. If at all possible, please provide us that information within that time frame, or at least contact us and let us know what's going on. If you need more time, that would be fine also. Many times, one party or another won't respond with the information that we may have requested, and we have to go forward with the documentation that we have. And sometimes that, even though there may have been misconduct, if we don't have the documentation that we need, the claimant could be eligible for unemployment insurance benefits because we don't have the documentation. Also, please make sure that you monitor your accounts regularly. When you do sign up for sides and you are listed in the employer portal, please make sure, and if you aren't in the employer portal or on sites, please sign up for that because that really does help you to have a up to the minute account of what's going on with your account, where you're what you're liable for, what your tax rate is, et cetera. Also, if you haven't looked at your employer account or on the employer portal for a while, please go in and look at that and make sure that your information is correct. Because sometimes when we do send determinations out or we try to contact you via telephone, we will use the information that has been provided to us previously, such as phone numbers or addresses, to try and get information in regard to a separation. And many times that information is outdated, for example. If you are an employer and you changed your phone number, please make sure you go in and update that phone number so that we have the most updated contact information that you have. Or sometimes we will have employers who have listed a human resource manager who was the human resource manager 5 years ago, but maybe they left your employment and aren't currently the human resource manager now. It saves time on both sides if we have current information to help us know who is authorized to provide us information. If there are old names on the account that are not authorized anymore or they're no longer employees, then please remove them and provide us with the correct information. And again, to register and respond to unemployment insurance claims electronically, which is a great system. It really helps. And many employers are happy with how quickly they can obtain information and we can get information. And also that we're not contacting the employer multiple times to obtain the information. You can go to labor.idaho.gov/sides and sign up for that. With that information, thank you so much for coming to the workshop today, and we will be answering any questions. It looks like there's a few questions in the queue that we will be answering, but if you need any more information, you can email me at labor.idaho.gov, and I will be happy to respond either calling you or providing an email back to you, a response in to whatever questions you might have. There may be questions that I can answer directly for you, or if it is a question, let's say, about your tax account, I can provide you the information to contact the correct party so that you get information directly.